How do we think about the interconnectedness? How do we think about not one thing that matters, but all the things and the relationships between them? And then think about how to make not just individual choices, but whole complexes of choices that benefit all those things and the relationships is how we start to think about it properly. And it's a much higher level of complexity of thinking. So when I think about COVID goal, think, okay, well, we want to minimize the total number of COVID related deaths. All right. But there are people who can die and recover. I mean, there are people who can get it and not die, but have permanent disabilities in terms of damage to heart or lung or kidneys or whatever. We'd also like to do something with that. Preventing ICU overwhelm was actually a really critical goal before prevent total number of deaths, because the death spike would go up radically. So you have to think about upstream ones as well as downstream ones. But then we start to think about, okay, let's make sure that in doing that, we don't damage other things significantly. So when people are on quarantine, how much does domestic violence go up? What happens to addiction patterns for kids who don't have school and just have 6 months of solid screen time? What happens to an economy where you have 40 million jobs that are lost? Now we see a lot of violence. We always see more violence, whether it was systemic racism as the trigger or other triggers.
We always see more violence when people are out of work.
Yeah.
Right. So
aren't being met by a system, they don't stay complacent with the system that's failing them.
So if you think of this as like 4 or 5 dimensional chess, like where is the human animal's capacity to deal with this? Like, are we actually going to be able to get people to think in that many ways? We're already failing to do it with COVID. Do you think that is, when I go back to the physics of being human, my hypothesis is I'm not sure that we'll be able to. I take a very optimistic view of most things, but on that one, building a brand new civilization without people first having to suffer a level of intolerability seems tough. Seems tough to get them to believe the things that they would have to do to leave the whale in the ocean, or whatever example we're going to use. Do you have thoughts around how we give a simple enough narrative that people can latch on and understand, okay, cool, I get what we have to do here?
For the most part, we aren't even trying to think about second or third order effects currently. Like, it's not even a thing we try to do.
Do you think nobody's thinking about it, or that people aren't listening? Because it's not sexy. Like, when I think about what's going on right now, so with everything that was shaking down with the death of George Floyd and how everything sparked off that, I started like really looking into it. I didn't want to just say some bullshit to say bullshit. Like, I wanted to actually understand like really truly what's going on. So I end up seeing this discussion about the difference between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and how Martin Luther King Jr. had a meta-narrative, which was religion. It was about unity, but he was measured. And I mean, he was very passionate, obviously, when he spoke, but it was like this sort of calming, soothing thing about bringing people together. Whereas Malcolm X was Black power. There was energy. There was aggression. It was tapping into that anger that was right there below the surface. There was nothing counterintuitive about it. And so he was able to really get people motivated and rallied. And I thought that's interesting. Like, when you think about human animus, there's something that pisses you off and it gives you the energy. I mean, literally, the world was burning last week, and you gave people just a little bit of a justification to tap into that. There is something about tapping into that aggression, that level of animation. There's an intoxication to rage. And when you can even just nudge people a little bit into that, you get that. So my thing is, I hear people talking, you're talking about this crazy eloquently, but is it giving people that sexy level of animation to get visceral, to tap into something that's aggressive and that feels so powerful?
If I think about the house that I'm in right now, it probably took about a year to build, and I could take it down with a wrecking ball in minutes. Or fire. It takes 20 plus years to grow an adult human and kill them in a second. It's easier to break shit. And the motivational complexes that break shit and the motivational complexes that figure out how to build complex things aren't the same. So yes, there's power in